where I grew up, I mean, no one came out where I lived and no one talked about it. And so my first knowledge of that you could be gay was Ellen DeGeneres and Finding Nemo. Like, that was 2003. Like, no one talked about it. I didn't know what trans was until I came out and someone had to tell me what I was. And because you didn't talk about it.
Hello and welcome back to You Need a Counselor podcast. My name is Julie Johnson. I am the president and founder here at Heart and Solutions. We are a mental health counseling agency. We're still doing telehealth anywhere in Iowa. So give us a call if you want to get started on inpatient or in-person or telehealth mental health counseling.
And I'm Chrissa. I am the vice president in charge of the BHIS department at Heart and Solutions. So BHIS stands for Behavioral Health Intervention Services. And that's the program where we go in home and work with children ages 4 through 18 on different behavioral skills. And we can also do telehealth or in school or in the office as well. And this is our podcast, You Need a Counselor. So we are designed for people curious about counseling, but have barriers keeping them from experiencing the benefits of counseling. Our mission is to share stories about counseling, good, bad, and indifferent, and spread the message that everyone can benefit from mental health and behavioral health counseling services.
So we post on Sunday nights at 5 p.m. Central. So we always say, just batch up your laundry or whatever horrible task you hate doing, batch cook for the week or put away your laundry, make outfits for yourself. Sunday nights at 5 p.m. We'll be doing it too. And that gives you that entire week to get in touch with our guest from that week, to get in touch with your own counselor if you haven't seen them in a while, to get scheduled and get set up to start the week right. All right, so today we've got a guest. We've got Chase Norris here with us. So I'm going to brag a little bit on Chase for you guys so you know who he is. So Chase is a licensed professional counselor in Illinois. And so for Iowa listeners, that is a licensed mental health counselor, but what they call it in Illinois. So Chase works at a place called Clock Inc. Counseling place there. And Chase really does a lot of advocacy work up there in Illinois for the LGBTQ plus community and at the community center in Rock Island, Illinois. Chase has a master's degree in community mental health counseling and has a lot of experiences personally and professionally with counseling in all different settings. So welcome, Chase. We're really excited to hear your perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. So tell me a little bit. So you are in Illinois. What is it that got you interested in pursuing a master's degree in counseling?
I grew up in a super small town outside of Peoria with little diversity, but really started to find myself when I went away for my last 2 years for my undergrad. And I had done counseling, and no fault to that counselor, but I was not in a state of mind that I was ready to put in the work. And so I was not very successful in that sense. But at that point, I had come out, I was born sex assigned female at birth. And so I came out in college that I liked girls and didn't go well with my family. And then I learned very quickly you can deliver pizzas with a bachelor's degree and where I'm from. So didn't do a whole lot, took a gap year, but at that point was coming to terms with my identity, which was not female, but male. And so I knew if I was going to come out again to my family, I needed to be in counseling, and did my research, found 2 in the entire Peoria area that worked with trans individuals. I made the right choice after doing my research on both. And this counselor really pushed me to address all the things that I had really neglected in processing, and really good about talking about my cat for 45 minutes every session, and pushed me through that. And I'm very confident that without that counselor, I don't think I would be alive. And how much she made a difference and an impact in my life, I wanted to be able to do that for somebody else. And so that kind of prompted, well, guess we're going for another degree.
Awesome.
Wow, I love that. Well, I mean, first of all, I love normalizing that you can go to counseling and talk about your cat for 45 minutes. I just think that's Awesome. Because what is a safe space if we can't talk about our animals, our cats, our dogs, our hamsters, our snakes, right? Things that bring us joy and give us that companionship. So I love that. And so what was it that kind of let you know in that first counseling experience that you weren't in a place at that time to be able to benefit from those counseling sessions? How did you know?
It really wasn't until after I had graduated and was no longer seeing that counselor. I mean, I enjoyed her. I went every time, and I complained about the same issues. Depression was in full force and not the best healthy relationships, and newly discovered being in a lesbian relationship, which I had never met another lesbian, let alone was in a relationship. And so it wasn't until I had graduated that I was able to look back and like, oh, yeah, that was me. I didn't do anything about changing. But I was very limited on what I could change based on living in a dorm with my ex upstairs. And there was a lot out of my control, but I also was not doing much of anything to kind of make it a better situation for myself.
I love that insight because you worked with this first counselor and like you said, enjoyed those sessions and thought, hey, this is what counseling is. And then looking back on it, you're able to go, oh, I wasn't in a place to be able to fully benefit from the changes that maybe I would have wanted to make at that time. But I had these barriers, and kind of knowing that those barriers were there. Those are real barriers. Your ex upstairs, that is in a dorm situation. I mean,
Yeah.
like, that's a barrier. And coming from a small town where like you said, you'd never met a lesbian before.
Yeah.
And so coming from a small town and not having any role models or having any people to look up to, or to be able to say, yep, this was right for them, this is right for me, those are real barriers, and those are barriers in life, and they're barriers in counseling. And sometimes in the moment, we don't recognize them as barriers because we think, well, it's us in some way, right? And then we look back like you did and go, yeah, it was me, but in a different way than I thought, right? I wasn't ready, and that's okay that I wasn't ready. I love that. And I also love that, even though those changes, when we are in counseling, those changes that we kind of wish we could see, or changes in our external world that like we wish we could control or have influence on, that those things can still be there. And we can still go through counseling. That can still be part of our journey, even if we're like, nothing's changing, right? So I love that. Okay, so then you were in undergrad, you were in college, you would come out to your family, and that was a difficult situation. Can you tell us more about that?
I had a couple family members, like my father. It was a 30-second conversation. He was not shocked and was very content with it. My mom's side of the family, very religious. And so at that point, I had a couple family members very heavily involved in their religion. And I came home from college that first Thanksgiving to a 3-hour family lecture that I was going to hell. And so that made the holidays quite interesting.
Awkward, yes.
I didn't want anyone for Secret Santa that year, but it was.
They were getting coal.
I wasn't even going to spend the money on coal. I was going to.
You get less than coal.
Yes, and that was a huge shift for me because I've always been very close with my family. My aunt and uncle and 2 cousins lived right next door. My grandma was a mile down the road. My dad was in town, but I only saw him a couple days a week growing up. But I was very close to my family. We did everything together. And to go from that to now, I don't want to go home unless the campus is closing and I don't have people in my corner, and I'm not able to be myself and talk about college the way I wanted to when I was home. And so that was rough for a couple years, and then graduated, and I think a month after graduating came out as trans. And so then it was like, let's go round 2. And ironically, that went much smoother. But at that point, and then definitely being involved in my counseling program, you really start to process a lot of things in your life. And I was really able at that point to recognize I did a lot of things wrong the first time coming out, like I have learned the hard way. Your parents don't like you to text them at work that you're a different identity. Doesn't end well. But I was very much in that selfish mindset and wasn't able to recognize that other people needed time to process this news, everything that was going to be changing, where I had my entire life to process that. And so it wasn't new to me, but it wasn't clicking. And so I went about things much differently round 2 of coming out, which I think helped a lot.
Wow. So in a lot of ways, you were able to go through this experience of coming out to the same family members, to your same support team, but you were different. You had changed because you had learned from your first experience and you had gone, okay, these pieces did not work for me, right? And these pieces maybe do. And I think that a lot of times in the LGBTQ plus community, like we don't get the opportunity to do it twice. We don't, it's like one and done sometimes. And so it's like, oh gosh, if I could do it again, right? Maybe I would do these things differently. And you were able to have that experience of being able to use what you had learned. And yeah, I the texting our parents at work.
Not my best life decision.
Love this example though, because because when we're in that that place sometimes, right? You talked about, you were already having some depressive symptoms at the time, right? You were already having some anxiety symptoms at the time. And then the idea of, okay, I don't know how people are going to react, and then being able to go, I just need it to be done, right? I can so relate with that, right? I just need to put it out there, rip the bandage out, and like then whatever happens is what happens, but at least it's done, right? I'll live with not having it done. And so I can so relate with that. And then I love your reflection and your insight afterwards of going like, oh, wait a minute. When I put myself in their position though, like I'm in the middle of my workday and I get this text, like, I don't know what to do, right? I don't know what to say. All of that, I think it's so much, there's so much empathy woven into your story, even the way that you talk about your mom's family, who you're super, super close with, who had a difficult time adjusting. And it sounds like with both times that you came out, right, had a difficult time. And being able to give that empathy of like, no, these are supportive people. This is more painful because I do rely on them because they are my support. And if I had a family that wasn't supportive from the start, it really wouldn't have been as painful to lose that, right? And so I love that you're able to, with that kind of hindsight, that's always 2020, right? We always look at things differently that happened to us before than what's coming up in the future. But I love that you're able to, yeah, that's because they were supportive. They're supportive people. And so goodness, so and it sounds like your dad, but even the first time that you came out and told your dad that you were a lesbian, he was supportive. It sounds like he was not surprised and he was supportive. Wow, what was that like to have that experience? Because you've kind of gotten both sides of the spectrum here too, right? Family that had a difficult time, even though they have good hearts and they mean well, and then family who has a good heart and means well and was supportive and was able to show that outwardly towards you. What was that like with your dad?
Well, I had come out to my dad first, and so then I was kind of riding that high, and then everything went downhill from there. But I was almost expecting more follow-up questions, anything, and it was just like, I think his only question was, is this the first? I would have thought that there was more. And it's like, okay, I definitely clearly didn't hide it very well. And so I definitely was on that high and then came out to the rest of the family and then went very much downhill, which that caused a bigger disconnect between my father and my mom's side of the family, which they had been divorced for decades at that point. But it was like there was no reasoning and justifying from my dad's angle of why I was treated the way I was because of this. And it wasn't something I could change or had done. I was just living my truth. But then it was interesting when coming out round two, my dad struggled significantly more than my mom's side of the family did with the transition. So it was like polar opposites.
Very interesting. And so then those sides of your family, were they able to kind of see the other person's perspective as they kind of flipped roles?
They were, and then where my dad was still, it took some time for him to really, and I don't think he even knew what trans meant until I had told him. And so, but it was still way more supportive during that than my mom's side was when I came out the first time. And so, and it took some time and a lot of processing and some hard, difficult emotional conversations with mainly two family members who were causing the bulk of the issues that really aired everything out over the past several years and really got us to back. And I don't think we have ever had a stronger connection as a family as we do now, but it took very difficult conversations to get there.
Absolutely. I mean, it takes hard work to come out the other side and be able to go, okay, we went through this as a family and we all, like maybe I wouldn't text you at work, right? And for them, right? Like maybe I wouldn't give you a 3-hour lecture if I had it to do again, right? Or I wouldn't tell you you were going to hell, things like that. But everybody being able to do what it was that they did, because we can't go back and change that. We do that hard work. We have those hard conversations. And if everybody's willing to have those conversations and to be able to have that empathy for the other people involved in the situation, like you said, we can come out stronger on the other side, and more connected and have more understanding of who we are. I mean, I would imagine they had a better understanding of who you are. And I think that's sometimes expected, but I would imagine that you have a much better understanding of who they are and where they're coming from after going through coming out to them twice.
And it was interesting because in my final semester of grad school, I had did an independent study with my director, and I had to do a project of some sort, and she had assumed I would make a PowerPoint for a group that I started, which I led into Clock, but I made a entire documentary on my transition from the perspective of friends and family. And so I have every family member who was at that 3-hour family hell meeting talking about it. And really going through that process of making the documentary and having all of these different family members in it, I learned something new from every interview, but hearing everyone talk about that event from their perspective several years after it had happened, it was very interesting at what everyone saw and retained from it and what they observed. And it's like, didn't recognize that what you would have seen from this spot, but was very interesting hearing everybody talk about it. And everyone talked about why they said what they did, justifying that, but then also how they came full circle and understanding that, yeah, that was not right. But at the moment, this is what I had and what I did doesn't excuse it, but it was very interesting hearing everyone talk about that event.
That's really cool.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. That's wonderful. And what a great way to give a little structure to those and some really great purpose to those hard conversations. And what a great way for them to be able to express that, because we don't usually get a second chance to revisit some of the things that we might regret, or things we've said to people that we love that may have hurt them, right? And we don't always get the opportunity to do that. That sounds like your family
Or they
was
agree
able
to being recorded to talk about
right.
Yeah, true.
And I throw it on YouTube, and now 30,000 people have watched it.
Oh my gosh! So how do we find
Yeah,
that?
I know. I was like, I want to watch.
It is on Clock's website under our resources page.
Wonderful. Wonderful. So we will link that. So you started a group or an organization that then kind of morphed into Clock. Tell us about that evolution. How did it start?
So in my internship semester, I had started my internship site's first LGBT youth group. It was a build medical insurance group, which I didn't like because if you didn't have Illinois Medicaid, you couldn't come to my group, which was not inclusive. But I was already pushing a lot of battles, and that was one I was not going to win. But I had 5 kids that came every week, and they didn't go to the same school. They really wouldn't have met each other had it not been for that group. And I knew the group was not going to continue when I left, which has proven to be correct. And asked them if you could have any resource, what would you want? I didn't like just leaving them with nothing. And they said they wanted a community center. And I said, that's not realistic. I've never had a business class. I barely know what nonprofit means, let alone a 501c3 status. That was nothing to me. And they said, well, don't ask if you don't want the answer. So touche. And so I Googled, how do you start a nonprofit? And everything I read said you need a business plan, step 1. And so every suggestion idea came from my 5 group kids, and I told them I promised you nothing, but I will see what I can do. And my grandma is my biggest supporter, but I could blow my nose and she's proud of me and probably putting it on Facebook. But her dating lawyer, I went to him and I needed to know if this was realistic or if I was in my own reality of this dream that was far-fetched. And I had an answer for every question, or I could tell him how I would get him that answer. And he said I needed to see this through. And so I drained my savings and started moving forward with that process of getting incorporated, filing a 501c3 application. And I have the fastest 501c3 in the Quad Cities, which normally takes about 9 to 12 months. And I got it in 134 days.
Wow.
And then halfway through, I'm offered a full-time job, benefits, salary, everything, and didn't know what to do. So I went back to grandma's boyfriend and needed him to tell me what to do. And pretty much I would deeply regret not pursuing this. And so I turned down the job. I waited to tell my parents till after Clock was successful that I turned it down. And it started with this dream of 5 kids. And now 4 years later, we've moved into our second property, which is 4 times the size of our first. And we now have a staff of 3, and I have a board of directors of 7, and still learning as I go. I don't know what an executive director does, but I'm doing a bunch of everything, and whether it's construction to our building or counseling or graphic design, meetings, every day is different.
Wow. It really, I mean, anything that is entrepreneurial, that's creative, where you're creating something out of nothing. You literally go through every day, like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I don't know what I'm doing whatsoever. I know what I did a year ago, right? Like, I know what I did. I know how I would do it differently. But at this moment, I have no idea. And I think it takes it takes a lot of bravery to go through that and to admit, like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to file a 501c3, right? Like, I don't know what that is. What are those letters? And to be able to create something out of nothing. And it sounds like this is the kind of community space and group that you would have loved to have in Peoria, Illinois, or just outside of Peoria. Because there weren't these kinds of places where you could meet people who are sharing the similar experiences that you are. And like you said, this was a group of kids who otherwise would not have found each other. And 5 kiddos, or 5, young adults, or however old they are, together, that's strength. There's strength in that. And there's community in that. But the same 5 people disconnected from each other, there's isolation in that, right? That's a difficult place to be. And so it sounds like the mission of this, really just being able to bring people together, is something that you would have enjoyed as a child.
Oh yeah, and where I grew up, I mean, no one came out where I lived, and no one talked about it. And so my first knowledge of that you could be gay was Ellen DeGeneres and Finding Nemo. Like, that was 2003. Like, no one talked about it. I didn't know what trans was until I came out and someone had to tell me what I was, and because you didn't talk about it.
Wow, I mean, what an interesting experience going through that, knowing who you are to the point where like your dad knows who you are also, right? And it's like, well, yeah. Um, and not having the language to express that or to
Yeah.
communicate that to other people. If there's no word for cup, I don't know how to tell you what I'm drinking coffee out of, right? Like, and so having that language or having that understanding, to be able to communicate that and express that to other people, so important. And you weren't exposed to that information as a child.
No, and I admire, I mean, people always say like kids are coming out younger and younger, and it's like, because it's represented. They can see themselves in media. Now there's more actors in movies, TV shows, there's singers, and all these different areas that they can see themselves. And there's also the internet where we didn't have that when I was growing up, and I couldn't look anything up to see where I fit. And the fact that I have more brave, like these kids are way more brave, because I never could have taken that on while I was living in my parents' house at their age. I would never have been able to risk that.
Absolutely. Even though you knew at the time, right, didn't have the words and also didn't have that freedom, right, that college allowed. For college, you were able to go, okay, I'm my own person now, right? Like I get to be who I am now because I've got that distance, I've got that autonomy. And then it does come full circle, because then bringing that home, right, and going, okay, how do I marry like who I am at school and who they've known me as for the last 18, 19 years, right? It makes a big difference. When you came out as trans, it sounds like there was a lot of education that had to happen for you and for your family members. What were some of the things that you learned along the way, or that you were able to pass on to your family members to help them understand what was happening, that you think that might be helpful for other people to know?
During that time, really, my grandma was the only one fully invested. Like she went with me to Chicago for my first appointment to start hormones, and she was with me through all of that, where I was learning as I went, and a lot of my family members at that point didn't want to talk about it. And so it was very much, it's cool what you're doing, but we're not going to tell people and talk about it, and which is totally fine. I'm going to be very upfront and open, and I'm going to put everything out there. And I was learning as I went. And it wasn't until I moved to the Quad Cities and I was 7, 8 months on hormones at that point. And it wasn't until I moved here that I met another trans person. Like I hadn't met anybody. And so I really didn't know what to expect. And I didn't have anybody I could go to. Hey, why am I now angry all the time? And I have like no patience or a short fuse for anything. Well, that's a huge side effect of taking testosterone, but I didn't have anyone to give me that insight of what to expect, when I should expect things, and how long it takes for things to actually start working. And so it was a big learning curve, but the more I learned as I went through, then I educated my family with what I had.
Absolutely. There's a lot of biological experiences that you have that you're like, I didn't know that this was caused by, right? It's kind of like when you discover you've got an allergy to something, right? Your body just does things. You're like, what is happening? And without that, list of side effects, or without kind of hearing, because, you could, with any medication, you read the back of the bottle and it's like may cause, all of these things, but you might not have any of those symptoms, right? Or you might have additional symptoms that aren't listed on the bottle. And so being able to talk to other people about, well, what was that like for you? I would imagine would be extremely helpful. And going through that without, in my own mind, and I'm just trying, to put myself there. I imagine being, the time that I was being pregnant and not knowing anybody who had been pregnant, right? And like not knowing that, oh, that's okay. Like that's normal. Like you're not dying right now, things like that, because there were times where I thought I was dying. And so, the idea of going through that without other people who had been through it to talk to about it. It's a scary idea. I imagine that was very, very scary and very, very isolating to go through. I love that your grandma went with you to those appointments. I mean, how cool. Really, really cool. I mean, that's support. You know, when we talk about support, there's support where it's like, yes, I'm not going to lecture you. I'm not going to change your mind. I'm not going to, argue with you. It's okay. And then I'm going to go with you to these appointments. And I'm going to drive so you can nap on the way back, things like that. That is real support. I love that.
She's become very educated and took it upon herself to get books, and she's read a bunch of different ones and sends copies to everybody and tells anybody she can. She also, I like to call her like the up jumper, and she's always got to one up whoever she's talking to. And if someone's like, oh, my granddaughter graduated high school. Oh yeah, well, my granddaughter's now my grandson. So like, I think she likes that bragging.
She likes it.
Oh, she does.
Oh,
And
that's
which I
funny.
even had to tell her a couple weekends ago, because she asked, well, how do you start a conversation with someone who you think's in the community? And I'm like, you don't. It's none of your business. They bring it up, then you can talk,
don't.
but don't go off of stereotypes. Your gaydar's probably broken. Don't stay in your lane. But I think
Aw.
the only thing she would have been having issues with and wouldn't have been as supportive if I had legally changed my middle name, because it's her name and I refused. And so I have kept it and I embrace it. And I think that would have been the pushing point of, no, you took my name off yours, so we're done here.
Oh, I love that. I mean,
Funny.
that's a legacy thing, right? And so I love that she's able to express that, and that you're able to know that about her and understand that about her, and that it's not her not being supportive. It's just that like she's really proud of that.
Oh,
And
yeah.
that's how she is going to live on. And that's how any of us are going to live on. And so I think it's adorable that she has educated herself so much, that she's continuing to educate herself, but also that you're continuing to educate her, right?
Yeah.
Like, no, like you don't ask, you don't go, oh, hey, guess what? My grandson. Like,
Yeah.
but I think that's a very common grandmother tendency just in general, right? My daughter is half Korean because I'm Korean, and there's a lot of like, well, my Korean granddaughter, right? So similar similar situation. So yeah, I think that's maybe a grandma thing. Proud grandma thing.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, cool. So at Clock, it is counseling. Is it groups as well? Group counseling still?
Yep,
And
we have
then,
counseling groups, trainings, workshops, free events. We've got, with our new space, we have our trans closet, so people who need clothes to match their gender identity at no cost. We have that. We have chest binders that have been donated by GC2B that are completely free for people to have. We're launching we just started promoting it. We have our LGBT plus mentorship program, the Clockwise Connection. And so that's a new and hands down our biggest program we've ever had. And so a bunch of different stuff. And I knew when starting Clock, I wanted to have, every suggestion is from the community. It's not my center, it's yours. If we don't offer something, my job's to make that happen. And we've yet to turn down any suggestion or idea from the community, except the kids have asked for 3 years for a ball pit, and that answer has not changed, and it's still very much no. But I knew at the end of the day, whichever direction Clock went, I would always be able to counsel, and I am very grateful for that, because perks of being the boss and doing what I want. I don't counsel full-time. I have 45 people on my caseload, but I don't see, unless I screw myself over on a schedule, I don't see more than 4 or 5 clients a day, and that's not always the case. Like I had 2 today, and so I don't get burnout from it. But also I knew that I wanted to be able to do that in some area within Clock.
yeah,
Wow.
very cool. I love it. I love the community atmosphere of it, that it's not you driving the ship, it's the community driving the ship. It's the needs, you're seeing a need, needs are expressed to you, and you're going, okay, I don't know how to make that happen, but let's try, right? Let's figure that out. And let's the ball pit when no. Germy places, extremely
That was pre-COVID.
yeah. No, I'm with you on the ball pit. But I just think it's so great. And now you've got 3 team members as well there at Clocks. So are they all counselors, or what are those roles looking like now?
It is just me. I'm the only licensed counselor. And we've got our director of operations who started as our administrative assistant, and he has definitely outgrown that role and is doing a bunch of stuff. And then we actually just hired our 3rd person, so she hasn't even signed paperwork yet, but she will be our fundraising manager. And so that hopefully will be very, very successful. And I will have a little bit less financial stress of how do we keep our doors open next month, and how do I pay my people who don't want to work for free and they need to pay their rent, and a bunch of different aspects. But very happy with our team, and we're small, and I'm very grateful for my board, who's very much a working board, not a governing board, and all hands on deck, and we do big things together.
I love that. I love that it's free to anybody, and the education is free, and the groups are free. And are the counseling sessions free as well, or are those through insurance?
We don't take insurance yet, because that is a whole process. They don't teach
Oh
you.
my gosh,
Yeah.
I don't recommend it. Do not recommend if you can avoid that. Yeah.
So everything currently with counseling, which is our only, that and training are our only paid services, and it's cheaper than most copays.
Wonderful. So you're taking that accessibility again, right, and expanding that for other people. And there are those barriers to counseling. So I mean, you've talked about a few of them already that you experienced yourself, right? Looking in the Quad Cities and going, oh my gosh, there's only 2 counselors that work with trans individuals. What the heck? Like, I got my options are 2 people, right? And providers, I mean, word does get around now, which is good, but providers who do work with trans people or work with people in the LGBT community, like that, they get full, they get busy really, really fast. And so, that is definitely a barrier is, okay, well, I want to go to therapy and I want to talk about my cat and I and I want to talk about my life. I don't just want to talk about coming out. I don't want to just talk about what it's like to be a trans man, right? Like, I want to talk about my life, like things going on with my friends and things going on in my business. And like, I want to be able to like have counseling that's that's counseling, right? And I think that in our field, what I notice sometimes is that people will kind of providers, right, will kind of like specialize and go, okay, yep, I work with LGBTQ plus community. And then like that's the focus of counseling. And it's like, okay, yes, there's a time and place for that. People will come in and say, this is what I want to talk about. Great. At the same time, like we're also human beings, like we also have like relationships and things going on and stressors that have nothing to do with our sexual orientation, right? And so and that I think sometimes gets lost in our field. And so I really love that you're out there doing the work, because like you said, there aren't that many options always for people.
Oh yeah, and especially clients that, I mean, I've had my fair share of clients that I am not their first counselor in the Quad Cities, and I definitely have my list of people I will never refer people to. But I always let them know at the first session when going over like confidentiality and like what counseling looks like. It's like there's no rules. Like obviously, yes, there's guidelines of like confidentiality and like reporting, but like we don't have, I'm never going to force a client to talk about this, or this. And if they want to talk about their cat, great, we will talk about their cat. And I think what's hard in the counseling program that you only have so much time with clients when you're actually seeing them, and you're told solution focused therapy is not what you should be doing, and that's awful. But yet they're expecting that because you're supposed to get to the core issue with these new clients in 5 sessions because that's all you've got. And it's like, and I am very grateful for my supervisor at my internship site who told me, if you have a client that wants to talk about frogs or what they watch on TV for 6 months, that's what you do, because that next session, it's going to click, they're going to trust you and feel confident, and then they're going to open up. And that was a game changer, and not putting pressure on clients. And I've got clients that we've been working together for 8 months, and then finally, like, I think we should probably talk about this thing in my life. And I'm like, I'm waiting for you. Like, we will do whatever depending on how many staff are here in the day. If it's not, I mean, I've had a very angry 9-year-old that during construction, I was going to let him put a hole in the wall. I was going to tear the wall down anyway, but he had to talk about what he was experiencing. He did not want to do that, so I put a hole in the wall. But I don't have, and if I've yet to say no to any client about what would be helpful. I've had clients help me paint a door because they needed to physically be doing something while talking. And it's like, if it's going to work for them, why wouldn't I try that? Because it's not my session. I'm not here for me. I'm here for them. And if that's helpful, that's a game changer.
I love that. Absolutely. That there are no rules in terms of what we talk about, focus on, think about in session. As long as the client is comfortable and they're not breaking boundaries or breaking, harming themselves or others, like, it is whatever it is, and we're humans, so like, we are random. Like, we are random. If I have a session on a Monday, that might be a totally different session than if I had that session the following day. Like, completely different session, right? Because I could take a BuzzFeed quiz today and it'll be different tomorrow, right? So those things, giving that allowance for time, because that time is one of those key ingredients for counseling. Is that, yep, I can be a trustworthy person and I can be a safe person to be able to talk to you about things, but without time, right, we can't always get that right recipe going. So I think that is so important, and that's really great advice for people who are kind of on the fence about counseling, to go, listen, if your counselor is pressuring you, like, if you come in every time and you're like, oh, I don't want to go to counseling because they're going to make me talk about my mom, or they're going to make me talk about, this or that, like, that might not be the right fit, right? Like, you should be able to go in and talk about your frog or your Twilight. Oh my gosh. When Twilight was happening, right? Like, I went and saw all the movies because I was like, I feel like I've already seen them, right? So those kinds of things, it's like, why not, right? Teach me Portuguese, right? Whatever it is, because I'm getting that time added into the equation. And time is required to build trust. So I think that is really, really awesome. So I know you said that you had then, when you said, okay, I'm going to come out to my family, I'm going to let them know that I'm trans, I'm going to let them know that I'm male. I know that you went to counseling again at that point, right? Because you kind of said, okay, I do want to focus on this in counseling. I feel like I'm in a place where I wasn't before, where I can kind of dig into these things and make these changes. What were some of the things that you experienced in that counseling session that were helpful to you at that time?
Oh, she called me out. She was direct, and which is what I needed, because if I can control, and she knew when to push and when not to. And she's like, if you want to talk about your cat, great, but we're going to address at some point everything you have swept under the rug. And if you are about to come out to your family, we should probably talk about your family, not just your cat and what you're doing with working at a pizza place. And I am very grateful for her. And there was a lot of times where it was like, this sucks, I don't want to do that, nothing's going to change. And it was very much in that mindset. I don't know why I expected counseling to be beneficial when I had a negative outlook on it, but she was consistent, and she was like, when do you want to come back? You should come back. I want you to come back. And it's like, well, I got nothing going on. Sure, why not? Insurance is covering it. And it really, she didn't give up, and she was very helpful and direct by that, which taught me every counselor that I've had since her, I need someone who's direct because I can segue any conversation into something irrelevant and need that direct feedback. And I think it's awesome because where she was a huge part of my journey in my life, like when starting clock, I mean, her and I stayed in contact when I moved to the Quad Cities because I didn't know anyone and I was far enough from home where I didn't have any physical support, and she didn't like that I didn't have any connection back if I needed help or support. And she, after, I mean, she was with me through all of grad school, and when graduating and starting clock, she became my clinical supervisor for my counseling here. And so it's like everything came full circle, and we definitely broke some ethical boundaries, but I am grateful for it. And she is still very much involved with me and what I'm doing. And I've watched her go from getting her doctorate and everything. And it's been, well, 10 years that we've been
Wow.
involved in each other's lives. And it's crazy to think it's been that long, but like she knew exactly what I needed.
Yeah, absolutely. There are, in building that relationship, right? We can talk about our cats and we can do all of that, but a skilled counselor is going to know when to push and when it's okay. And they're going to back off sometimes. They're going to push and they're going to go, oh, that was too strong of a push. Okay, we're going to back off a little bit, right? And then I'm going to push again a little bit. So being able to have that structure sometimes and that direction. And again, it's based on where we are when we go in and start those sessions, right? You were in a place then where you were like, hey, okay, this person's pushing me, and yeah, I'm going to push back. Of course, I'm going to push back, but right, I'm going to keep coming because I know that this is beneficial to me. Whereas the first counselor that you had, if they had pushed, you might not have been in a place. You might have been like, oh, this is done, right? I'm out of here. And had that be a totally different experience. So I think it's a great point that a skilled counselor can kind of gauge, right? And kind of gauge that, oh, we need to be building trust right now, right? Or, yep, we've got trust and this person is ready to make some changes, right? They're scared. Of course they're scared. These are scary changes. And being able to push a little bit and offer that structure as well, I think is so important. So I love that distinction you're making. So the quote that you had shared with us as one of your favorite quotes is, you won't always get the thunder to warn you of the storms ahead. Tell me about that. That is an interesting one. I've never heard this quote. So tell us about that.
It is a collective soul lyric. I have it tattooed on my forearm, but a friend of mine that after graduating from college, I like to say I was evicted, but my mom moved to Texas and took a job and I was aware of it, but I think it's more entertaining to say evicted. But I had moved in with two mutual friends, and one of them I was significantly closer to, and she was close to the other one, but her whole family's very musical and knows every lyric to everything. And she told me about that song and listening to it, and she's like, I really like this quote for you. And it just, life sucks sometimes. Like there's going to be good days, and I have a lot of clients who are stuck in that mindset of, okay, things are going well, I'm waiting for the ball to drop, and it's like, it will drop because it's life. You can't predict anything. You're not always going to get that warning sign of, hey, in 3 days this is going to happen. How do you prepare? And it's like, you go through the motions with what you have and using your support system, but you're never going to get that warning, hey, this is going to happen, be prepared.
Absolutely. Love that. Yep. Never heard that quote before, but or that lyric before. It sounds like a really, really powerful song, and what a great message that, we can't predict it. It's going to happen. We don't know when. and we'll never know when. And so for those of us struggling with anxiety symptoms, right? You go, yeah, sometimes there's like a safety feeling in anxiety because it's like, oh, I think I know something's going to happen, so I can like prepare for it. And this is saying like, no, it's not, right? So the worrying, is it serving a purpose? So
Wasted time and energy.
yeah, absolutely, right? It's a rocking chair, right? You don't get anywhere, but you move around a lot. So I think that is great. Wonderful. So if you could give one suggestion to somebody on the fence about starting counseling, what suggestion might you give them?
I think, what do you have to lose? If you're not going to do counseling, nothing's going to change. You're in the same situation. But if you do seek out counseling and then finding the right one, because do your tour of counselors, because you could be in a room of your preferred 100 gender and not have a connection to any of them. It's the same with counseling. If you don't feel that connection, that is okay. If that counselor, and I let people know, I may not be it. Let me know if things aren't working, what we need to switch up. If you need a referral, like there's still people who don't feel comfortable talking to a male. I can't change that, but I can give you a list of great accepting referrals who are female. And once you find that right fit, there's so many great positive outcomes that can significantly change your life. But by not doing counseling, you're in like the hamster wheel. You can put all the energy in, but you're just going in a big circle, but you put them in one of those little balls, then you can go anywhere. And so you get to choose, are you wasting energy or you making changes and doing things?
I love that. I love that. Sometimes we feel like we're always moving but the question to ask is, am I going anywhere? Right? Am I using that movement productively? And going to counseling is a way to be able to take that energy you're already putting out and use it to move us forward and in the direction we want to go. So what a great metaphor. Absolutely love that. So anybody listening, if you are in the Quad Cities area, you can find Chase at Clock Inc. So we will link that as well. So you can check out their resources. You can check out the documentary, which I will be watching. That sounds awesome. What a great resource, as well as other resources that they have on the page. And then trainings and educational groups and all kinds of different things that are free to the community as well. So go check that out at Clock Inc. Awesome. Thank you so much for being here with us, Chase. We really appreciate it. And I feel like, every time we share our experience, there's that opportunity that somebody will hear it that needs to. And you are a great living example of be the person you needed when you were a child. I just think it's amazing how, we've said it multiple times, but everything comes full circle. And you are absolutely living that full circle life of being that support that you could have used as a child.
Well, thank you for having me. This was fun. I enjoyed it.
Yes, it was fun. Thank you so much.
I'm Chase Norris, and I need a counselor.
Awesome. Me too. So does Chrissa. We all do. I love it. All right. If you are in Iowa and looking for a counselor, give us a call at 800-531-4236. We're still doing in-person sessions, and we're doing sessions on the phone and on the computer.
And like Julie mentioned at the beginning of the episode, we post new episodes every Sunday at 5 p.m. Central Time. So save up whatever task you hate doing and listen to us while you get that done. And we can help convince you to contact a counselor or get set up with whoever our guest is that week as well. So if you have any questions for us, you can reach us on Facebook at You Need a Counselor Podcast or on our Instagram at You Need a Counselor Podcast there as well. And I'm Chrissa Hunt.
And I'm Julie Johnson, and we need a counselor.
And so do you.
Bye.